Hello and welcome back to the channel. This episode is all about putting pop, some pizzazz back into your photos. So what we want is some nice clean blacks that will help give some detail in the shadows without crushing the whole lot. And especially the most difficult part for me is to get some nice details back into the highlight, especially after the passage of filmic and sigmoid, which have a tendency to kind of smooth all that a little bit. So that's what this episode is about. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel. That will help it grow. Okay, I'm Nicholas, and let's do this together. Okay then, so here's an image. For the moment, all I have done is a little bit of exposure. There we are, that's the scene referred default filmic RGB. We can put some standard colors on with the color balance RGB. The image is slightly flat. I have increased the contrast a little bit already with filmic. You can do that with sigmoid too. I'm going to use the tone equalizer to get some global contrast. So this is the global contrast curve I've done. I've just centered the masking there with the automatic mask exposure button and just added a little bit of highlights, and I've lowered the lower part of the curve. Haven't touched the white point or the black point, and that's just adding contrast. But if you notice, the blacks here in the window are not very black. The whites here seem to be kind of blown out, but actually they're not. There's nothing blown out here except for in the top left hand corner. There's nothing wrong with the exposure. I have a little bit of raw data missing from the top left hand corner there, and that is all I have. So now let's see how we can get some nice deep blacks. So a recurring theme in this video will be the use of two modules, which are local contrast and diffuse and sharpen. And the choice of the two will depend on the look you're actually going for and the processing power of your machine. So if we start with local contrast, on the basic settings, that will give you some kind of improvement in the local contrast. You can push the shadow slider to the right, which will darken the dark part, so you can go as far as you like without losing the detail you care to keep. The mid-tone range can be pushed, but not too high because it will start affecting the highlights. I wouldn't touch the highlights too much because you are going to lose all the detail. If you're looking here at the fur on the side of the head there, you are going to lose a lot of detail. So I would be quite cautious about this module, keep it reasonable, and you have some kind of improved local contrast. It works, it's very fast. Let's take a snapshot of that and go to diffuse and sharpen. I think I need to remove that effect. There, diffuse and sharpen. So I've made for myself a few presets. So I have local contrast, low, medium, and high. If you want to look at the settings, I've chosen for low. For medium, it will just be an improvement based on the number of iterations. And for high, the same again, I do increase a little bit of sharpness. So you can actually have a look. I can go from one to the other. It's very subtle, the low setting. If I go to 10, then you can see the difference. We are getting much cleaner blacks, which is what I'm going for here. I'm not bothered about the highlights yet. We'll see that later. I'm bothered about having clean blacks. And the higher setting would be for 15 iterations. And there I'm sure you can see that the difference is much bigger. And if you improve this sharpness as you go up, I can go too high, you see, so the effect is really darkening the darks. Now that is obviously far too high, but if I put it on 1, I can actually there get some very deep blacks into the photo, and it's up to you to judge how far you're willing to go. I will just put it on medium to give a fair comparison with the local contrast module, which is here. So on the left, local contrast, and on the right we have diffuse and sharpen. And So there we are. In the darks, I get the feeling that the diffuse and sharpen is doing a slightly better job. Um, but we have lighter highlights with diffuse and sharpen, which are a bit darker with the local contrast. So let's see what we can do now to get some detail in the highlights. So let's go back to the module, which is local contrast, and the preset I have, which is for clarity and highlights. Now I have several of those. This is the one that I use from time to time. So here we have, you see, so we have flat highlights there. And here we are giving them some punch. You see how the fur here on the chest looks gives it a more 3D like effect. There, that's quite flat, and that's giving it some effect. We're getting some detail back in the pavement. We're getting some detail on the buildings there. So that is the difference we have. We didn't have in the photo very much detail in the fur to start with. So anything we can get back is a bonus. So this is based on the bilateral grid. This is a recipe that I read online. I found someone who tried this. I just basically copied it and experimented with it. It has the downside, has two downsides to it. The first one has a tendency to add noise to the photo, to add grain. So you need to be very careful on the denoising. And the second one is that as it's placed after filmic, if you actually go too far with it, if I try and get to see if I'm blowing out the highlights, as I'm after filmic, then it has a tendency to blow out the highlights. You can always use, well, I would recommend not using it 100% actually. Let's press O to get rid of that. I would only use it sparingly, around 50 to 60%, just to give a little bit of detail. I'm looking at the chest here and just give it a little bit of pop there. And that seems 68%. You see, we're giving it some detail without kind of washing everything out. It has also to be mentioned that I'm only using it, if I put the mask on, I'm actually masking out the highlights. I don't want to, I've already worked on the dark part of the photo with the local contrast, and now I just want to work on the highlights. So I have a parametric mask which starts at 75% and goes right to the end, or at least close to 1. And that's all. I haven't put any feathering. I've just got this kind of soft mask made with the parametric masks. Let's take a snapshot of that and give diffuse and sharpen a go. So let's get rid of that. Get rid of that and go to diffuse and sharpen. So I already have my local contrast, which I'm keen to keep. So I'll have right click a new instance of the module, and I have a preset here, which is called clarity and highlights, which I can let you take a peek at. So here we have before and after. The effect is much more subtle. You'll see it as we zoom in, that we are getting detail back in the highlights of the photos. You'll see that there are some images where this effect is too strong. This one, it seems to be a bit feeble. If you want to add more to it, beware of the iterations, because if I move these up too far, then I can get into some kind of line drawing effect that is really too far. I actually keep it quite low. I think I was on 2, but I can work on the edge sensitivity. If I want to get more effect, I can bring that down, and I can bring the edge threshold down too. But you see what's happening there? That's too low, and I don't want to introduce any artifacts, but we are getting some kind of result here, some kind of detail coming back in the cheek there. And it's overall looking a little bit sharper too. So that's the idea. Wait until it works. So that is before, a bit long, and after. I find quite a strong look to it. But you can see we're getting some detail that is actually far too strong. I'm realizing that now. I can move the opacity down, or just move these two a little bit back up again, move the opacity down, and try and compare before and after. So that is without and with. So that's much more subtle. And if we want to compare with the local contrast, you'll see the differences are quite large here, because we've lost our, in one, we retain the smoothness in the highlights, and in the other, we've lost this a little bit. The difference is quite minimal on the face. It's much more effective here, where we have these outlines that have been created by the local contrast module, and that diffuse and sharpen doesn't make. And well, there are some slight differences between the two, but both seem to work. Let's have a look at those on another image. Now here we have a sunset image made with a GFX 100S, and that explains why I'm still using the 4.9 version of Darktable, because the 5.0 version still has its bug with these Fujifilm files that come out all purple. I'm sure that'll be fixed soon. So this image has some basic editing done to it, color calibration, just to get a few colors, and sigmoid. I've actually added, no, not color calibration, sorry, color balance RGB. I've also added some global contrast to the image, not using the tone equalizer this time, but by boosting the highlights here on the brilliance tab, and I've lowered the shadows. So that will give you some very fast global contrast. It has, well, there's less control, but it's a quick method to use. So let's test the two previous modules to get some detail back, get cleaner, crispier image. Let's go to local contrast first, and well, we just have it basically on here. So that is on, so off and on, just some local contrast. Sometimes maybe boost the shadows. I have a tendency not to touch the other sliders very much. And then right click new instance and go to the clarity and highlights, bracket scene, which are these settings for the module. Why did I put scene? Because in the options for the parametric mask, I had RGB scene. So I'm using parametric mask every time I want to get some details in the highlights between 75 and 100%. It's actually feathering off from 100 down to 75 every time. And it's the same for the diffuse and sharpen module. I forgot to say that earlier, but I'm only targeting the highlights for the detail. So here we have some nice detail back in the highlights. We have those crispy clouds, which you either like or you hate, but it's a one way to get them done. Let's take a snapshot of that, and we'll remove these two instances of local contrast and use diffuse and sharpen for the same thing. So if I start with medium local contrast, well, that's not too bad already. Do before and after. I think that's done its job. Looking at the horizon here, where I want to see some contrast between the horizon, the darks, and the sky, and up to another instance, and let's do clarity and highlights. Clarity and highlights, sorry for the jump, which is targeting the same highlights, you see. Now maybe if that's not enough, what can we do? We can reduce the edge threshold. That'll give me something sharp until it gets crazy sharp. But we want it to be, well, we want some detail, don't we? What we can do actually is put in a little bit too much and then back down on the opacity. And maybe you see we're bringing a bit of, I'll put that up higher. We're bringing a pop back into the sky there. It works particularly well with clouds. And let's compare the two then. So that's the diffuse and sharpen method. This is the local contrast method on the left. So you see there are, well, both skies are popping. I would say, however, that if I zoom in to 100%, you will start seeing some differences where we kind of get these sharp outlines on the local contrast module, which we don't have. You see, you get some darker patches appearing, which we don't have on the diffuse and sharpen part. And maybe around here too. I'll zoom in just a little bit. You see the detail on the right. We're losing that. It's brighter, more contrasty. We kind of have these lines, this kind of white patch, which we don't have with diffuse and sharpen. So, well, it's up to everyone to choose which version you prefer. So this image is a quick one that I'd like to show you. I have actually masked out the faces of the people there in the window to avoid any kind of trouble. I'm going to zoom in here to the wall. It's the wall I'm looking at. And I actually have put in the detail in the highlights. And I'm hoping that wall kind of looks natural. If I remove the clarity in the highlights adjustment, then I get something that is actually very flat. So that is on, off. So you see how effective the diffuse and sharpen module is at getting detail back in the highlights. And if I zoom out, I hope you can see with the YouTube compression that there are some changes here. I'm getting some detail back into the image. And the same thing, I'm doing it with diffuse and sharpen here. But I could also do it with lateral, or local contrast, sorry, with, here we have another version where we don't have anything happening there and we're getting the detail back, so off and on, and the detail disappears and reappears. So that is one quick example of an application. Walls, pavements, all sorts of things. Try it on skin if you like, but be very wary on the skin, because if it's too strong, and it always is too strong, your skin will look plastic and artificial. You need to have that kind of module toned down to the 20, 30, 40% maximum, just to give a bit of life back into the skin. After that, you're in trouble. And now to finish off then is this image I'd like to show you. This is a picture I took in a museum. This is an old, I'm going to say old, but it's hundreds of years old. It's Chinese porcelain, and the beautiful thing about it is the amount of detail there is on the actual bowl itself. So I've done quite a lot of work to this photo to try and get the balance right between the darks and the lights. The only thing that's left is to actually see some of the detail in the bowl here. So the first thing I can do is, well, the clarity and highlights. So I can switch that on. Takes a bit of time because there's a lot of work, quite a few modules before. So you see that is the clarity and highlights with the bilateral grid. So if you want to see before and after, so that is quite impressive in the details. So let's take a snapshot of that. And if we want to compare with what the diffuse and sharpen can do, let's have a new instance of that, and clarity and highlights, and see the amount of detail. So that is much more subtle. If we want to see a little bit more, maybe there we are. I'm bringing it down. You see, as I come down, the details appear, and that is exactly what I'm after. So I think we'll look at before and after here. There we are. And if you want to compare with the clarity and the highlights, oh, it's working, it's working. Come on, there we are. This is on the left, done with the local contrast. If you look at the edge of the bowl there, you'll see some differences. You see, it's given this white halo, which you like or you don't like, and the bowl is flatter here. So there we are. On the left, the local contrast module. On the right, diffuse and sharpen. Up to you to decide which you prefer. But anyway, it's still, in my opinion, better than having neither. Well, there we are for that. So this video will stop there. I'm sure that Some of you will have comments to make, so please let me know your thoughts. You probably also have improvements or suggestions for the placement of the cursors for the diffuse and sharpen module here, how to maybe improve on that. I'll let you play with that and explore and share your findings. And I'll see you all in another video very soon, I hope. So bye-bye, everyone.